What do you do when you're facing temptation? I'm gonna tell you two quick stories. The first is from Alexander Hamilton. If you got a $10 bill, or if you've seen the Broadway play on Disney Plus, you know a little bit about Alexander Hamilton. He was brilliant. He was a great orator. He was a great writer. He was a great financial thinker. Whatever he tried to do, he succeeded. Well, one day in New York City, it was in the middle of summer, he was working on passing some legislation through Congress for George Washington. Alexander Hamilton was the Secretary of the Treasury, and he was trying to do some financial things that would give America stability in the future. But he was getting a lot of flack, and he was super stressed and just working 20 hours a day trying to get this through and figure it all out. His wife was on a vacation up in upstate New York, and it was hot and muggy in New York, and she was upstate next to a lake in a cabin just enjoying the beautiful time, and he was so frazzled and so stressed. And then all of a sudden there was a knock on his door one day, and he went to the door and he opened it, and there was this gorgeous young woman there, and she had a sob story about life and things just weren't happening, and she just needed a little help. Could he please just spare a few dollars? Now, Alexander Hamilton's mother had a very similar story. She had a very hard life. She died when he was young. He never had a father, and his heart just went out to this woman. He says, of course I can give you some money. And so he gave her some money, and she said, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna walk home by myself in the city. And he said, ma'am, I'll walk you home. I'll escort you. And so he escorted her home, and at her doorstep, she paused and turned around, and she invited him in. And Hamilton, he had always had a weakness for the ladies. And he was so stressed and so frazzled and so lonely, and she was so beautiful. He hesitated. And he said, well, I guess I could just come in for a quick drink of water or something. And he went inside, and her invitations didn't stop. And pretty soon, he began an affair with this woman. You see, at the critical moment, Hamilton hesitated. Now, this was a trap, not just a moral trap that started an affair that was awful for his marriage and his conscience, but it was a trap because her husband and her had planned this whole thing. You see, after a couple of weeks of meeting her, he got a letter in the mail from the husband. It was a blackmail letter saying, if you don't give me money, I'm going public with this story. So Hamilton had to pay him off. And he continued the affair, and when he finally stopped, he had given quite a large sum of money to this guy. Now, your sins always find you out. Later, it came up. His political enemies figured out about the money he had been paying, and they thought he had been doing bad things from his position as the Treasury as the Secretary Treasury. And when he confessed to his political enemies, no, I didn't do anything wrong for my job and the money, I just had an affair and I was paying someone off, they were horrified and they used that against him. When his wife found out, it really hurt his marriage. There's another story you probably know of a similar situation. Joseph was a young man, and he was in Egypt, and it was hot, and he was working, and he was lonely, and he was stressed, and his master's wife, who was also gorgeous, called him in one day and said, Joseph, I need your help. And she had a sob story, and he said, okay, I'll help you. I mean, she was his mistress, his master's wife. He had to do whatever she said, so he helped her with whatever chore she was, excuse me, working on. And then when that was over, she said, I need some more help. And she invited him into her bed. And Joseph did not hesitate. Immediately he said, no. And she tried again and again and again. And finally, one day, she didn't just ask, she grabbed him. She pulled him close. He could feel her. He was so tempted, and he ran. I mean, he didn't just run. He ran. She was holding on to his cloak that it actually came off in her hands. He ran away so hard and so fast. You see, Joseph and Alexander Hamilton were very similar guys. They both started at the bottom and they both made it to the top. They were both brilliant. They both could see things into the future that other people could not see. And they both were tempted by gorgeous women. One man hesitated and one man ran. The hesitation was the ultimate downfall of one man. And that running away led to phenomenal success for another. Today, just want to remind you that you are like Joseph and you are like Hamilton. You have got potential and talents and things that you can do that are just amazing. But you're going to have a temptation. You're going to run into something, and it's not going to happen when you're feeling good. When you're on top of the world, that temptation always comes when you're hot and stressed and lonely and hungry, and you're just at your end, you're exhausted, and then the temptation comes, and it is powerful. Now, for me, I'm a perfectionist, and so when I think about that possibility in the future, it stresses me out because I feel like I've got to be perfect. I've got to be perfect. Every time it comes, I've got to be perfect. Oh, and it's just overwhelming. But here's the key. Here's the secret for you today. All right? Temptation only lasts for 1 second. It's 1 second. Now, you can do anything for 1 second. You can hold your breath for 1 second. You can stand on one foot for 1 second. You can do so many things for 1 second, and you've got 1 second to run or hesitate. Because if you hesitate, then you have another second, and another, and another. And the longer you hesitate, the more beautiful your temptation looks. The longer you hesitate, the more the trap morphs into something inviting. But if you're like Joseph and you just run, boom, temptation's over. You ran. You're getting farther and farther away from it. The harder you run, the weaker that temptation gets. History's full of good men and women who hesitated. And that hesitation always causes pain. James says sin, when it is full grown, leads to death. So sin starts as a little, kind of doesn't even matter. You know, it's a white lie. It's a little sin. No one will know. But it grows and grows and grows until it kills you. If there was a murderer standing right in front of you and you had an opportunity to run, you'd do it. You'd run. You wouldn't hesitate. Your temptation is trying to kill you. Now, I don't know what your temptation is, but you know what it is. You know where that weak spot is. And the next time it hits you, because it's going to. Remember Joseph. Remember Alexander. Don't hesitate. Run. God bless. Hope you have a great day.